If you are somebody who is trying to balance all of the things, trying to accomplish it all, and if you also happen to be somebody whose brain works a little differently than others, then guess what? This episode is just for you. Hi, I am Noed and I am your host. So let's talk. Stay tuned. This is an episode that I've been wanting to do for a while. Here's the thing. I am not neurotypical, and what that means is that my brain does not function and operate the way that the average brain does. I am neurodivergent. And we'll talk about what that looks like for me. What that means, though, is that I have to have systems in place in order for me to stay organized and balance all of the things as best as possible in a way that actually helps me and enables me to be able to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish, whether it's professionally or personally. And I figured, in the modern society that we live in, our lives are demanding a whole lot of us, especially in the Western hemisphere, as part of the Western culture. All the things are pulling demands and demands and demands. And I figured the tools and the systems that I personally have in place, maybe ones that could help others. So I figured, why not share? Why not talk about it? So here we go. Before I share my experience with neurodivergency, I want to preface this by saying that, hey, I am not a medical professional. I'm not a psychiatrist, and this is not intended to be a diagnostic tool. I'm simply sharing my experience with neurodivergency, and that's it. With that said, listen, in the last 10 years, so I have been working in the corporate world well over a decade. And during that time span, I have taken numerous assessments. And these have been psychological evaluations and personality assessments and just all kinds of assessments that have been important in order for a determination to be made as to whether I can handle a specific role or not, including executive roles. I have applied for executive roles where they've made me take a lot of assessments. And usually the person reviewing my results will say something along the lines of, do you know that you have ADHD traits along with some high functioning autism? And it's like, at first, I'm like, what are you talking about? But the more I've learned about it, I'm like, that actually kind of makes sense. Some of the traits that I have, I'm like, yep, it makes sense. And family history, autism, I have autism in the family. That actually makes sense. And a lot of these assessments have described my brain as an executive brain. I even had one assessment that described it as an architect brain because I tend to think in outlines and bullet points and can do that really, really quickly. It's almost like when ChatGPT spits out stuff, it's kind of like that. But I also see stuff in pictures. So when somebody's telling me a story, I am literally picturing it in my brain, which leads me to ask random questions that are seemingly random to the other person, such as, what color was the shirt? What was the weather like? Because it helps put the picture together. That is just the way it is, which I consider it to be my superpower. It's my superpower because I can go into a business, look around, ask a million questions, point out areas of opportunities, and put together a strategy on how to get it together, hand it to the person, with a fresh eye, fresh take, fresh vision, and then they can run with it, build, fix whatever it is they need to do. And it wasn't until recently that I realized that that is not how everybody thinks. And at first, I felt kind of weird, like I feel like a weirdo. Why doesn't anybody think like I think? But I've come to understand and have come to embrace it, and knowing that that is just my superpower. That is just a gift that I've been given. With that said, this brain, it or said superpower comes at a very high cost. That means that my brain tends to run a lot. It's constantly running analytics. It is constantly trying to perceive shifts in moods, shifts in changes. It runs a lot to the point where it's just like, shush. Like I don't even want to hear you anymore, brain. Like shut it down. And what that tends to do is that there are times where the brain just wants to shut it down. I typically will experience what's called task paralysis. Well, I'll have a bunch of things to do. I'll have the desire to get them done. I'll have the will to get them done, but my body just won't move. It just won't. It'll flop on a couch somewhere, unable to move, barely unable to move. And, as a woman, sometimes the hormones, the way they fluctuate, kind of have those things have a big part to do with that. And that's just the reality of how my brain works. I know that I can be more analytical in the morning versus the evening. So the creative stuff, I got to leave it for the evening hours. It is just the way that I have gotten to know myself and embrace who I am. But with that said, because I'm a brain that's constantly going and thinking and can do all the things, at least I think that's maybe my the delusional side of me, where I feel like I can do anything and everything. That means I got to keep myself organized. That means I got to focus on a task at a time. And yeah, and so that's the next part. I'm going to share with y'all how exactly do I do that. Well, the first thing I had to do was accept that I can't just wing it sometimes. And it is so annoying because I wish I could be like most folks where it's like, you know what? I have these things to do. I'm just going to wing it and they'll get them done. I can't just wing it. Okay. So one of the things that I have implemented, it is calendar blocking. And I actually got the idea from a lot of just reading and watching resources that C-suite executives like CEOs and CFOs, just people in high executive roles with extremely busy selves and high demanding jobs have this is what they do. This is what they implement, what they've implemented in their lives. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it. And it does tremendously work. And that is called calendar blocking. So calendar blocking is exactly what it sounds like. You block things out in your calendar. And a lot of people tend to do that in just for their place of employment, where, hey, I'm going to block off the hours where I'm going to check my emails. And then I'm going to block off the time that I'm going to be using to make phone calls. I'm going to block off this time for my breaks. Like they just block off specific hours during the day at work. I do calendar blocking both at my job and in my personal life. So in my job, I've had to learn to create what's called office hours. Part of my job is I got to talk to customers and interview them quite a bit and make arrangements for them, that kind of thing. So I have implemented office hours. So for example, this is just an example. Let's say I were to work from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. I typically will then block off the calendar from, hey, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So if a customer is trying to call, I am not going to stop everything I'm doing to work on their stuff. I will answer the call and say, hey, this is my availability, and block it off. And I do it within that time frame. That way, at the beginning of my shift and at the end of my shift is giving time for my brain to adapt to the fact that, hey, we are now starting the work day. But it's also giving my brain time to wind down and not be stressed out, not like run from one task to another, run from work to my personal life, which I know that's normal. In my personal calendar, it'll be blocked off as just work. But typically an hour after I get off of work, it'll be blocked off on my calendar as chill time. I sometimes work from home, at least most of the time, meaning I do not have that commute to decompress, to switch my brain from, hey, I'm at work to now I'm going home to handle business at the house and be a mom and handle the rest of my personal life. Therefore, I take that time in my calendar to wind down. And that time can be for me to take a nap. It could be for me to chit chat on the phone for pleasure, for me to scroll through social media, however it is I want to spend my time decompressing post work. That is how I get to do it. As of recent, I'm trying my best to calendar block sleeping time. That's very challenging for me. I'm just in a season where sleep is a challenge, dealing with insomnia and things like that. Sometimes it's the demands of the day that it's like, hey, this is all the sleep I can map out. Sometimes I have to map out certain things like kitchen time because after a very long day, there are times where I don't want to come home and cook. I don't. There are times where I have to block off, hey, time with my kids. And that may sound crazy, but sometimes you have to block off time in a calendar for the people that you love. Like, hey, I want to spend intentional time with you, and I have to do that with my kids. And I do. And I even block off things like miscellaneous time, meaning, hey, this time is for whatever. It could be spending extra time with my kids. It could be extra time working on a project, extra time, however, it's called miscellaneous time for a reason. Now, do things come up? Yes. And you adjust accordingly. You can look at your calendar and be like, you know what? I'm going to swap out my miscellaneous time with this. Da, da, da. You adjust accordingly, but you stay on task. And for a brain that at times says, hey, you know what? I want to scroll on social media a little bit more to unwind. If it's time to spend time with the kids, I'm not going to be on social media. If it's time for me to cook, I'm not going to be on social media because I got to work on task. It just helps me keep it together. And it is annoying because I wish that I didn't have to do that in order to stay focused. And I try not to do it in the weekends. I try. And I try winging it, but it's just very hard on this brain. And I know it must be annoying to people in my life when I say, hey, because my keyword is I'm trying to map out my day without having to explain that I calendar block and why I calendar block. So if you know me personally and you hear me say, I'm trying to, hey, like let's say I'm trying to meet up with you or whatever. Hey, what time are we going to meet up? I'm trying to map out my day. Do you know around what time? Because I'm trying to map out my day is because I'm trying my best to balance it all, balance all the things, my responsibilities and everything without having to, you know, abandon or neglect any other areas or things that I have set out to do. Plus, also with it's an ADHD trait, typically a neurodivergent brain, at least this one. Let's say I'm going to meet up with a friend for coffee at 3 p.m. My brain will stay all day somehow mentally prepping for that 3 p.m. appointment. Like the whole day becomes about, I got an appointment at 3. I got an appointment at 3. I got an appointment at 3, which is why for us with this kind of brain, having morning appointments is best because it's out the way and now we can move on with our lives. And that's just the way it is. But calendar blocking, it's a must. Now, if you ask me what kind of calendar I use the one on my phone. I personally use Google Calendar just because it allows me to color code it and make it look pretty and give me alerts and all the things. But that's just my personal preference. Okay. Now, as far as projects go, because I'm a girl with a lot of projects, for instance, recording this particular episode, editing it, publishing it, whether it's writing, speaking, whatever project it is that I'm doing, I put it in an app called Asana. That's ASANA, which of course every app is going to try to upsell you some type of membership, but Asana has free features, and I feel like the free features are adequate for what I'm doing. Essentially, Asana allows you to map out different projects that you have, and I call these big tasks my projects. And then from there, I can list out every single step. For instance, let's say project number 1, create a YouTube episode. Well, there's a lot that goes into it. For instance, brainstorming what the episode is going to be about, researching for the episode, setting up for the episode. So things like lighting, location, the camera, etc., editing the episode, putting together the episode description. Like I have to break it down step by step because, hey, maybe in my calendar, I only have time to record it. But tomorrow I may have time for the editing and publishing. I got to create the thumbnail cover, different things. Maybe in the morning I can create the cover, and then in the afternoon I can work on the description, etc., etc. But it helps me break down my project into different phases. And if you share a project with somebody, let's say I don't know, let's say you decide to declutter a closet, and it requires the input of various family members. You can assign a task to a specific family member. If you decide to put this project in your Asana app, check it out. But I'm just saying that it works for me between Asana and Google Calendar. They get me together. And then I do use the notes on my phone. I do use the notes on my phone a lot. So with that said, here are some tips from me to you. Number 1, get to know and embrace how your brain works, how your way of thinking, your way of processing life. Get to know you and adapt your systems to how you function best. How you function best. Simple as that. Make it work for you. Also, realize that we can't balance it all. You can do all the calendar blocking in the world, and there's bound to be something that you just don't have time for. It's just going to fall through the cracks, and we're just going to have to make peace with it. That is a part of life. So balance is kind of a myth. It's kind of a myth. At least balancing everything is kind of a myth. And also honor your body by making time to rest. My brain tells me when it's time to rest. Like I just mentioned earlier in the episode, I end up with task paralysis. And that is my way of my brain saying, girl, we tired. And I do just that. I rest without any guilt. It's taken me a long time to get there. But get to know your body. Simple as that. And oh yeah, figure out ways on how to communicate this very nicely with other people. Keep in mind that not everybody will calendar block. Not everybody will understand or even believe in things like neurodivergency. You just find ways to kind of explaining to them. For instance, like I've had to say, hey, this is how my brain works, etc. I've sometimes in certain spaces I've said, hey, I'm neurodivergent, or hey, I'm battling some ADHD. Some people can understand. And I've even considered getting the official diagnosis from a psychiatrist. I haven't been wanting to because I'm like, for what? I'm not going to be on any meds or anything like that. This is just the way it is. But, considering like I may need some uh, ADA protection at my place of employment, because of that alone, I have considered it. So just again, another way to communicate that this is how my brain works. And as I mentioned earlier, communicating with others sometimes will be like, hey, you don't have to explain the whole calendar blocking thing, but you can say, hey, checking in because I need to map out my day. Simple as that. But the point is, communicate with others and don't expect others to balance and organize themselves the way that you do. This is just what you do for you. But I think that pretty much covers it. So with that said, I am curious to see, how do y'all stay organized? Do some of you wing it? Some of you have a to-do list? Like how? Please. Because maybe one of you may have a system that may work a little bit better for me or for others. So I'm curious to see. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope this episode has helped in any way. And yeah, till next time. Peace.